What's up, guys? So today we are going to talk about some more positioning properties and what these do to our layout. On the left, it will look very similar to what it did in our last video. The header here, the title, is now white, and I did that by going down here in the header declaration and adding the color white. I also added this section here, and that is, let's go down here to our code. That is another paragraph below the existing paragraph, and I just said this is the sidebar because you'll see what we're going to do. We're going to make it a sidebar. As far as placement is concerned, very important for accessibility. We want to have our headers first, then our article content, that's the main content, and then if we have any sidebars, we want to put that beneath. Even though we read from left to right, which would make us think maybe we want the items that appear on the left to show first, if a screen reader program is reading our website, we want it to read the main content first and then any sidebar information, which is why we put it at the bottom here, although we'll use CSS to put it where we want visually. The last part that's in here that wasn't in my last video were these semantic tags. We have the header, the article, the aside, and then the footer, and then I wrapped them all in one single div for design purposes and called it class container. So let's go up to our CSS and see what's going on up here. So for the body paragraphs in H1, so all the paragraphs in H1 within the body tags, they all have a default margin of 0 and they all have their text align center. I could have centered the text by going into each style rule and put text align center, but why do that several times when I can just have a rule that applies to everything? Remember, it's all about specificity. It's a hard word to say. So if I have an H1 declaration, which I do down here, and I tell the margin to be something different, it will be, because the rules are looked out from bottom to top, and the one that's most specific will win. So a header H1 is more specific than the body H1. Okay, so moving on. The dot container, that's a class, remember, the period. We have the font assigned here, the background color assigned here, and then we put a max width of 736 pixels. Why 736, you ask? It's because right now I have this set to be the size of an iPhone 6 Plus screen. And later on, when we start talking about media rules, then you'll really understand what it's all about. But for now, just know that that's where that number came from. For my heading, we changed the background color to this darker blue. We added a bottom margin of 20, that's why there's a gap here, and made it white. With the article, that's what's here in the center, we have the background color is white, the width is 250 pixels, have a padding of 3, still have our border, and then we have our margin is 20 pixels auto, which is why it's centered. For our new paragraph that we've just added, it's the aside paragraph rule, which we have a background color of light yellow, a padding of 3, and a font size of 75%. Anytime we use percentages, it means it's relative to the parent. So it's going to always be 75% of the parent size. So if I set a font size down the road for the parent, then this will slightly grow as well, which is nice because that means I don't ever have to set this. I just always want to say it's smaller than the parent. If down the road I decide I want to set a specific size, I could always do that. And then our last property here is our footer. We added a background color of the same darker blue and then a margin of 20 above just so that we have some gap here. Okay, so now that we understand what code we have to work with, let's get started. So aligning elements with float. Now, by default, a browser renders elements in a web document in the order that they appear. So right now, it shows simply in the order that we coded it. This default arrangement of elements is known as the normal flow. In some cases, we want the elements that follow an element to wrap around it rather than being stacked below it. So in this case, I'd rather have this aside element be over here on the left. To accomplish this, we use the CSS float property. We can assign left or right values to the float property, which will align the element horizontally with the left or right edge of the parent element. So let's see what this looks like. Let's go here to the article, and let's remove it from the normal flow by doing float : right. Watch what happens. Oh, wow. Things are getting interesting, right? So it floated the article to the right, which then kept everything else in the normal flow, making it look a little interesting, right? But we're not done. I really wanted my footer to stay at the bottom. Well, we can control page flow also with a property called clear. Now, clear comes into play because sometimes we want to ensure that our text or another object follows a floated element. So I want this footer to follow this article element. To accomplish that, we use the property clear. So if we go down here to the footer and we add the rule clear, now we have to tell it what side, right? Well, we floated this to the right, and the right is what's overlapping. So that means we want to clear right. And then I'll click over here, and there you go. So now it's cleared right. So then it's just a matter of playing with our properties for our individual elements to get it to look just the way we want it. You're probably wondering why this is higher than this. My experience, I know that that's about 20 pixels, which tells me our margins are having an impact here. Let me go here first to the article, and let me first remove the auto, since we're no longer centering it. And then let's change this margin pixel to 0. Let's see what that does. And there we go. So now we have a clean line across the top. Now let's see, what else can we do here? I think this sidebar here needs a little bit more padding. So right now we have the padding set to 3 pixels. Let's try to change it to 5. A little bit better, but still it's looking pretty crowded. So let's play with our width value here. Right now we have it set hard-coded to 250 pixels. But instead, let's say that we want it to be 70% of our screen. And then with the aside, right now we don't have any width established. Let's go ahead and add one. And we'll say that our aside is going to be worth, let's say 25%. Let's see what that looks like. Don't forget our semicolon there. And see, there we go. It's starting to come together. And maybe I want to make that a little wider. You were probably wondering, well, why didn't she just do 30 in the first place? Well, look how crowded that gets. Remember, the width and height properties only impact the content. So if we have padding, which we do, or margins, which in this case we don't, or border, which we do, those all impact the size too, which is why you may have a gap. You may not equal 100%. So if I go here to 60, and this is only 30, then that's too much of a gap there. So I'm going to make this 65. Very good. I like that. I think that that looks good. Now the last thing I noticed here is the footer and the article are right up against each other. I'd like to have a gap there. So let's go back to our article. Right now it says margin 0. Let's go ahead and do the bottom margin with a value. There's a couple ways to do this. You could just do what we did before and establish rules for each one all within the same line. Or you can do margin bottom. Either one works. So I'm just going to add margin bottom 20, and there we go. And that's it. We aligned elements using the float property here in our article, and then we cleared using the clear element in our footer to keep our footer here at the bottom. Mind again with the float property, we can use a value of left or right. And then with the clear property down here, we could use the value of left, right, both, or none. If we use both, then it's going to clear itself of either element. If we use the value of none, you're probably thinking, well, then why even put it in there at all? But none means that the element is displayed at the next available location in the document, regardless of surrounding floating elements. So it does matter. I hope you found this video informative, and I will see you in the next one.